get started. So one of the most important aspects that you have to know coming into this, and seeing how iron uses ROS to make more ROS, is understanding that reactive oxygen species are everywhere in the cell. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I've got there that quote, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Every cell, every moment is creating energy of some sort, is going through some sort of biological process. All of those processes require energy. In the creation of energy, there is also going to be a creation of waste or a byproduct of that reaction. And ROS is the fundamental currency of basically cellular waste. It's telling the cell, hey, there's something here that needs to be taken out. Think of it like an office space. Throughout a typical workday, your waste paper basket's going to fill up with little odds and ends that you've accumulated throughout the day. Our immune system, our lymph system, everything that kind of keeps our cells clean, takes those on a moment-to-moment basis and disposes of them properly. It can be through, like I said, lymph, urine, feces. That's basically what our human excretion is all about. So, knowing this, and knowing that ROS are present in the cell to begin with at some fundamental low-level baseline way, is important to know. Okay, so ROS isn't bad. Our body has mechanisms in place to take care of them, right? And now you have to see now, what does that waste look like? Right, we've talked about ROS before. I think episode 10, 11, and 12 talk more about inflammation and how that works. But ROS, there's hydrogen peroxide, there's the superoxide anion, there's the hydroxyl radical. Okay, so what does ROS look like? Now, for most cells, the typical preferred ROS is going to be hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. You'll see hydrogen peroxide and H2O2 used interchangeably throughout the rest of the episode. They both mean hydrogen peroxide. Yes, it's the bubbly material that you put on wounds and watch it foam as it kills off all of the bacteria. But our body is incredible because, yes, hydrogen peroxide is a reactive oxygen species, which when we think of that, we think of oxidative stress and we think of inflammation. But hydrogen peroxide is the gentler version of ROS. So H2O2 is relatively stable, meaning that it's less likely to react with random things as it's being transported out of the cell. And because it is so structurally similar to water, H2O, H2O2, hydrogen peroxide is a lot more mobile. So it's going to be able to move through cell membranes and be passed out of the cell and into the waste system a lot easier because it looks a lot like water. And water obviously moves freely in and out of most cells. So this is kind of like the perfect way to package cellular trash because it's not going to cause any harm, right? It's like the equivalent of, you've got like a disposable bag in your trash can. That way you can kind of wrap it up, prevent any spills, give it to the trash man like you see here, and it can be taken care of responsibly. Now, the next thing to see is that, we'll go back. Okay, so the next thing to think about is that, so cells and cell parts that make energy are going to make waste. That's how it works. You can't create something without having some sort of byproduct. So When you think of the mitochondria in cells, mitochondria is the site of cellular respiration. It's where glucose is made into ATP. It's basically what's fueling our cells, right? So with this high energy organelle, the mitochondria, with that high energy also means that it's going to have a lot of waste, okay? And like we said, that's not inherently a bad thing. Most mitochondria have the tools in place to neutralize the waste that they're producing, okay? So all cells create ROS. The more energy that's being created, the more waste byproducts that there are going to be. The mitochondria is one of those places where there's a lot of energy being created and a lot of waste. Now, put that in the context of beta cells. Okay, beta cells are incredibly metabolically active. They have to be. In a healthy body, they have to be. Every time you are eating food, your beta cells have got to turn on the gas all the way up to make sure that it is creating enough insulin to keep your blood sugar regulated and to make sure that your cells have the glucose available to oxidize and make ATP, right? So those are it's just a necessary evil, right? If you're going to be a high metabolic cell, you're going to have a lot of waste. Now, beta cells have some adaptations in place to handle those energy demands and waste products. Of course, it's not going to be, it's not going to be given more than it can chew, right? So we've talked about how iron plays a role in the beta cells, how iron plays a role in the mitochondria. Iron is a very, very important catalyst in the conversion of glucose to ATP, right? So mitochondria are energy rich. Anywhere where there's energy, there's going to be a lot of iron, ironically, pun intended. So mitochondria, energy rich. If they're creating energy, they also have to be iron rich. If they're creating a lot of energy, they also have to be very ROS rich. So beta cells themselves, because of how metabolically active they are, they have very active mitochondria. The beta cells themselves are unique among the pancreatic cell types in that they have a special protein called hepcidin, which is responsible for regulating and modulating iron retention and release within the cell, which would make sense because when we eat and take in food, that's energy coming in. That's letting the beta cells know, hey, we need to make sure that you can make insulin. And the beta cells are like, okay, well, if I'm going to make insulin, I got to make sure the body has enough iron. So I'm going to use, that has a unique relationship with both iron retention and release, as well as releasing insulin. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. Additionally, the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, of beta cells is uniquely larger than in most cells. I think the size was somewhere about 14% of the cell mass was just one organelle, which is unusually high. But what this endoplasmic reticulum does for the beta cells is that it is basically like a bigger holding cell or trash can for a lot of those hydrogen peroxide ROS that are being let off by the mitochondria. But overall, the general idea is that it is a high energy cell creating a lot of waste. And it has these unique safety mechanisms in place to account for these high energy, high waste demands.